Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pick up with the ZOS Introduction and Workshop commands. So every operating system has commands. By the end of this objective, I want you to be able to describe what I mean by an MVS command. You should be able to locate the MVS commands manual. And in fact, this time for the presentation, I think I will go ahead and go to the ZOS bookshelf and show you where things are, because I want you to also be able to get online assistance interpreting MVS command output. I'm also going to describe what's called JES2 commands, and we should be able to locate the JES2 commands manual to be able to get online assistance interpreting JES2 command output. Then we should be able to list the facilities available for entering MVS and JES2 commands. Okay, MVS commands. Why do I say MVS and not ZOS? Well, there's another session coming up later tomorrow, and it's going to be an overview of the operating system. But I will tell you briefly right now, that will be repeated later, that MVS was the grandfather of ZOS. It wasn't even the father system. It was the grandfather system. There was another father system to ZOS called OS390. Then after OS390, it became ZOS. We have 5 decades of advancement of this, because prior to MVS, there was another operating system. But MVS did not have the Unix part, the POSIT compliant Unix. And so sometimes this represents some of the stuff that was upward compatible. And so as we grew the operating system and as we advanced the operating system, some of the things in the root of the operating system, or the base, or the fundamentals of the operating system are still there, such as MVS. So there are these things called MVS commands, because guess what? There's Unix commands also. So that's why we refer to, sometimes you'll read the books, and some of the books may say MVS. It's some of the traditional stuff that had been in the operating system prior to the more advanced stuff. However, I will tell you that MVS has also advanced. So there's new MVS commands. There's new MVS operands on the commands. It's not like all these commands are 50 years old, because they're not. So in terms of commands for the operating system, you're actually looking at the finite set of commands. One thing you'll observe here in column 3, all those set commands, that's for dynamically changing the behavior of the system. And you're going to see later on in a presentation I'm going to make about configuration and customization, that you set parameters so when the system is brought up, they refer to it as IPL, initial program load, also known as a boot. And when you bring the system up, there's parameters that get read, just text, and they shape the behavior of the environment. Well, you can alter the behavior of the environment dynamically with these set commands. Now, there's many other commands here, such as the one in red are frequently used, such as display. Now, while we're showing you a finite list of commands, I can tell you that if you go to the commands book and look up the display command, it's huge. There's a massive amount of things you can display. We'll be looking at some of those, and toward the end of the session, actually doing some and looking at the commands book. Because one of the lab assignments that I have, and I'll be showing you those toward the end of today, is to issue a couple display commands, then go to the book and look up different display commands for you to attempt. You can cancel things, you can modify things. Here's the reply command. That's if the message ID has a reply identifier. So you would reply to the number, whatever you want to tell the system. You can start and stop things. You want to start something, and that would be running until you stop it. That's different than JCL. JCL that you submit goes into the background. You can actually start JCL, which means it's a started task, kind of like a running daemon, and we'll talk about that later. You can vary hardware resources off and on. So this is a subset of the MVS commands. I'll be demonstrating some of this a little bit later. So the cancel command, you can actually cancel active jobs, started tasks, time-sharing users. One thing that I'll show you, I'll go out there and cancel a TSO user. And by the way, I believe I've given you the ability to cancel not only your ID, but cancel someone else's ID. So I can let you know this, if you cancel someone else's ID, I want you to know they can go into the log and see who canceled them, and you could cancel that person. But we don't want to get into that here. But you'll be able to do that. I'll demonstrate that, because I've given you quite a bit of authority on the system. Here's examples of cancel, where you cancel a job name.
Cancel someone out of MVS?
Yes. The question was, can you cancel somebody out of MVS? Absolutely, that's what this is. And you can cancel a user, which is a time-sharing user. Now, for many of you, some of the people in the room are kind of laughing a little bit, saying, we can do that? Typically, when you're in your own production shop, they restrict you as to what you can do. We're lucky where I work, we get entire operating systems and we can do whatever we want. We destroy operating systems and just reclone them. But for the purpose of learning, we want to give you that authority. Now, we have protected ourselves a little bit, but we've given you quite a bit of authority here, so this is your really opportunity to do things with this live system that you may not be able to do with your systems back at work. You know, because they protect those systems from you harming other people. Okay, it turns out that here's if you actually did a Google search on that number right there, if you look for that manual number, you would see it's the MVS, they call it the ZOS MVS system commands, and it turns out in Chapter 4 is all the display commands. We'll actually do this a little bit later. I'll screen share and do this with you. If anything comes up in the chat line that I should address, you just let me know. I think what Ron's doing, Ron's giving people in the chat line some updates every once in a while. And some people are doing commands, okay? Oh, yeah, that would be bad.
Wouldn't that make it unable to get to it remotely?
Exactly. And that's some of the things we can do later to demonstrate things like that.
Well, I think it was fine.
Yeah, it could be, but later on in the week, for those of you on the line, I'm going to be IPLing the system. So we're trying to show you a lot here. Okay, on the page that you're looking at now is a list of display commands. I'm not going to issue these. Later on, there's a lab where I tell you to issue these. Here's another list of commands that will become very important to us later on when we do talk about configuration and customization, like dspace parmlib. Now, I say parmlib, some people say parmlib, and this has to do with parameters, and lib means library. Library is a partitioned data set with members to get read. And then there's another command, display the program link list. This is equivalent to what the path statement would be. Where's the system automatically look for executable modules? There's also something we're going to talk about later in the week called the Authorized Program Facility, APF. And we'll be talking about that more in detail. And Paul Krutza, who may or may not be on right now, will be talking about that. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one here. A lot more display commands. We're going to be issuing a number of these display commands later on when I explain the operating system, like dspace ASM. What's the auxiliary storage? So many of these commands that you're looking at here, we'll be talking about as we move forward. but you get the idea of the MVS commands themselves, that there's a lot of them, a lot of display commands. Many more display commands for displaying information about the Unix environment. And if I remember, I'll issue some of these display commands. If I don't, remember this page when you learn to issue the commands yourself. Go out there and issue some of these commands and see what you get. There's some really, really powerful commands for looking at your disk storage. One command I like to tell the software people about is this one here called devserv. It's abbreviated DS, but devserv can actually list all of your disk storage, but it doesn't show you the used space versus available space, but it does show you vital product data about the disk controller and the disk storage, disk labels, and it's typically the hardware guys like to use that, but it's really pretty useful. But all these commands that you're looking at here are for displaying typically disk storage or tape storage information. There's a whole series of commands for looking at what we call the communications server. We have a whole section on communication server. Anything where you're displaying TCP/IP, of course, is the TCP/IP communication stack. DNet. Net is typically the SNA stack because SNA and TCP/IP are actually folded together and working together. It's called communication server. We're going to have a whole section on that on Thursday. But different commands that you can do. We'll be doing some of these commands, and they're very useful. Many more display commands. I'm not going to read all these to you, but it gives you an idea that there's just a huge number of display commands, and we've only looked at a very small fraction of them. So a modify command, abbreviation F, I can actually do things like this. There's a running address space out there, and I'll be describing what an address space is later in the week. It's like a daemon that's running. And I can, TCAS is really TSO. And what, yes, one question in the chat. Let me go to the chat room real quick. And can you guys see the chat when on your screens? Good. Okay, so there was a question in the chat line. Oh yeah, okay, so Dudley forgot how to get to ready. And that's not surprising because I'm flooding you with information. But remember, from ready, you can't issue operator commands. Well, I say that, but to get to ready, you would do =X, and then you may get an interim screen that talks about a log, and I believe it's 2 to delete the log. But that's for getting the ready prompt. In fact, I will probably get to the ready prompt after this, Dudley. Now, Ramon did respond to you. I got a feeling, Dudley, that what you want to do is actually issue a real command, and I'm going to be doing that. You don't do that from the ready prompt. You do it from SDSF, that Ramon's beginning to answer you. Ramon's not even in the room right now. He's doing it from his desk. Okay, so I'll move forward, but bear with me, Dudley, and you're actually going to see it. I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, what I want to point out here is I could modify TSO and say the user max is 0. And if I did that, if you log off, you cannot get back on. I lock people out, right. Now, there's all kinds of modify commands I can do, but that's one of them. Let's move forward. So the vary command, typically vary is for hardware resources, but it doesn't have to be limited to hardware resources. You can vary many things off and on, and I'm not going to get into all that right now because it's large. I see Ramon is responding to you. He doesn't realize that we're in the room talking to you. I'm not sure Ramon's listening to us. Oh, Ramon, if you're listening to us, would you just say hi in the chat line? Oh, good. Ramon's on the phone, too. Okay. So I'm going to go forward. Yeah. So to repeat the question, Ron said we're not going to say anything bad about you, Ramon. Okay, reply, MVS commands. Now, here's a case. I'm in SDSF, and I'm in the system log. Notice the *06 IEA 793A, no dump data sets available for dump ID, and it says something about use the dump DS command or reply D to delete the dump. So here, R for reply, 6, comma D. And then as a result of that, there's an IEE 600I, reply to that message was D. Now, there's a start and stop command that I talked about. You can start up things and stop things. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time there. We're actually going to be doing some of that throughout the week. JES commands. So I'm going to shift gears now. And you may or may not know what JES is. I'll tell you what, a show of hands of anyone that does know what JES is. So except IBMers. So in the chat line, raise your hand if you know what JES is, or what JES is about. Actually, at this point, I don't see any raised hands in the. Oh, we have one. Okay, so Keith knows about JES a little bit, knows something about it, which means that some of you may not know. So I'm going to lower Keith's hands. And could I have a show of hands of those that really don't know what JES is, this thing called JES? A show of hands, I do not know what JES is. Oh, so definitely Ramon knows what JES is. We know that's not truthful. Okay, so Dudley and Justin, they're not sure what JES is. Now, it turns out that JES, Job Entry Subsystem, is considered the most critical of the subsystems. And it's highly customizable. And basically, to start things like the communications area and TSO and to get batch jobs running, you need JES running, Job Entry Subsystem. Now, JES has a whole series of commands. You can actually look up the JES commands by doing a Google search on this book. I wouldn't do it right now because we will be doing some JES commands also. So I'm going to go forward. This is page 1 of 4 of JES commands. Now, it turns out that a lot of JES commands are related to things like printers and things. But there's many things you can do. Notice here, the $D is for displaying JES2 resources. Okay, and the backup device output, well, you back up a printer. Say, for instance, you got a printer jam. You need to back it up by so many pages, before it starts printing again. Now, here's a series of commands that are very useful to the system programmer for displaying details about summary of what's going on and the limits being set. So these are a series of JES commands that usually a systems person would use. More commands. This is page 3 of 4. And I'm not going to actually issue a lot of these commands right now. I just want you to be available. I want you to see a finite set of the commands. They all have different operands available to them. So the last page of 4, there is a start for JES. That's different than a start for MVS. A $T to alter JES2 controlled parameters. Even through JES, you can enter MVS commands, and you say, why would you want to do that? Well, there's some clever tricks you can play, and we may look at that throughout the week, where you could say $VS, and then what comes after that is an MVS command. More examples of JES display. There is something you're going to learn about called the spool. When we discuss JES, we have a whole section on JES. And there's a thing called an initiator that we're going to be talking about. You can display the initiators, and you can display what JES as active versus in the input queue or the output queue. It can be active, which means an execution. Here's a command to display all information about automatic JES commands that they're automatically set to go off at a certain interval, certain time of day. It's like a very cheap cron, if you will. However, we do have entire scheduling packages that are much more robust than this by far. Handles all kinds of dependencies and everything else. Okay, where can you issue commands from? Well, it turns out systems have a console. And there's a thing called the hardware management console that talks to the support elements. You may not remember this, but when we were talking about the hardware this morning, I showed you a picture of the hardware, and inside the mainframe there's two laptops. Well, those two laptops are considered a support element. Well, the support element has a console facility because you could have many operating systems IPL'd inside of there, but every one that's IPL'd, there's a tab to go to the console. And from the console, you can issue commands. Well, the support element is inside the box. This thing called an HMC, Hardware Management Console, is external. But all support elements can talk to the HMC. What that means, from the HMC, you can talk to multiple boxes. So you can actually, from the HMC, have control of multiple support elements that can serve as a system console. Now, another place you can issue commands, and this is what we're going to be doing, and this is what Ramon was talking about earlier, we're going to actually use the SDSF console facility. Now, in SDSF, you can issue SDSF commands. However, what you can do is you can also issue MVS commands from SDSF by doing a /. When you do a / in SDSF, that is like telling SDSF, SDSF, this command is not for you. SDSF, please pass this command to the operating system. That's what the / is. There actually is a TSO console facility where you could go into Ready and you could type in OPER, O-P-E-R, and issue commands. No one ever uses the facility, though. It doesn't work very well. Sometimes you can issue the command, nothing comes back until you end. And then when you end, you get the response back. It's there. People don't use it. Some people use it in a batch function. Another way to get in commands, if you have the authority, this won't work everywhere because there's JES customization you can do, but if you have the authority in JCL, and I'm going to talk about that later, you can actually do a // a space, and the word command, it's // yeah, there is one space, then the word command, followed by an MVS command. Through JCL, you can get commands in the system if you have the authority on the JES initiator that I'll talk about later. You can also enter commands like number 5 here in JCL. That's essentially this here, /*$MVS, comma, and then the MVS command is essentially the same thing as doing what number 4 is. Now, another way to issue commands, if you have the authority, is through FTP. It turns out that if you have the authority, that in FTP is typically for transferring data. And that's how you may know it. Now, you can transfer MVS data sets, or you can transfer MVS Unix files with FTP. But another thing you can do with the FTP server on ZOS, if you have the authority, you can say, quote, site, file type equal JES. As soon as you do that, you're talking to a JES reader. This is a clever way to put JCL into the system to be executed and get output back. I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later. But the other thing, if you can put JCL in, that means you can do commands through it too. And I'll remember to try to demonstrate this later, because it's a very useful facility for those of you that are learning the environment. Now, this is usually when I tell another anecdotal story. Many years ago, when I was working for IBM, I was helping a company port something to Unix System Services of ZOS. This group, I went there and they said, we do not want to use any TSO, no ISPF, no SDSF, none of that, because we just don't want to take the time to learn it. I had them do everything with FTP, everything. They were even modifying MVS data sets, because what I had them do, FTP the data set down to their workstation, use Notepad to modify it, and FTP it back. And then I had them doing all kinds of things using FTP. Now, I will tell you that we've got something now called Rational Developer for System Z that I spoke about earlier this morning. That means you don't have to know TSO, ISPF, or SDSF either, but we won't be talking about that and demonstrating that until Thursday. There's another form of command called a subsystem command recognition character. In some cases, there are some things that you're going to see throughout the week that we type in as a system command. We type in a funny string of characters. That's known as a subsystem command recognition character. So the system programmer that installs a product can actually update a parameter library member and say, if you type in this string of characters, that's talking to a specific subsystem, such as JES, like the dollar symbol. That's the dollar symbol that you saw in front of commands. $D was a JES command. Well, the dollar symbol represents a JES subsystem command recognition character. So, for example, one time I was helping somebody in England, and I was doing this on the phone. I wanted them to issue a JES command. So I said, enter $D something. And they did it. And when I said, what came back? And they said, nothing. Well, it turns out that system was using a different code page. The dollar symbol is the British pound over there. And once I realized that, they had a British pound keyboard, and so they would issue the British pound D, and it works. So it's a subsystem command recognition character. You'll see examples of that later with DB2 and other subsystems. So there actually is an MVS commands book and a JES commands book to do things. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and we're going to do a little bit of demonstration with commands and have you try commands as well. So if I were to ask you to describe the MVS commands, well, the MVS commands are the general purpose operating system commands. Can you locate the JES commands manual now? Yeah, you could get the book number or go to the bookshelf. Before we do anything, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm writing a note to myself here. I'm going to go to the bookshelf. And let me run in. I'm going to take everyone to the bookshelf first, now that I'm screen sharing. And I'm going to do that first. Okay, because I want you to be able to get online assistance interpreting the MVS commands, which is look at, describe the JES2 commands. There, remember, that has, in our case, it's a dollar symbol followed by something. We should be able to locate the JES2 commands manual. And if I were to say list the facilities available to enter MVS and JES2 commands, we talked about that in that very last slide. Different places to get command input. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share now. Okay, can you guys see my screen on your workstation?
We're looking at,
Pardon?
we're looking at other.
Okay.
You
You can see it?
showing.
Okay.
Showing the.
Now, at this point in time, I'm assuming that everyone on the remote can see my workstation, and right now there is a look at site that's up there. If you cannot see my screen, go ahead and raise your hand, and then maybe Vance, you could let me know if someone's got any problems. Now, what I'm going to do, remember that I did talk about documentation, but let me tell you how I find the manuals. Sometimes if I don't have it bookmarked, I just do this. IBM manuals. Do a Google search for IBM manuals. Guess what shows up first when you do that? If you do a Google search on IBM manuals, the very first entry is the IBM ZOS Internet Library, because it gets used a lot. This is the bookshelf. So if I click on this, I don't know what that gray bar is down the center here, but there's lots of information here, and there's different organizations of things. Many times I like to go after the PDF manuals, but there's different ways, and people learn to navigate this differently. So, for example, I want download documentation for version 1, release 13. So if I click on that, look at the different elements and features. See, they refer to them as elements and features. Remember, elements, base, features, optional. But these are different bookshelves. Now, where do I find the MVS manuals? Well, there is a ZOS MVS bookshelf. Where do I find JES? ZOS JES 2. Where do I find TSO stuff? ZOS TSO. We'll be talking about Unix system services later. Where do I find things about SDSF? Where do I find things about ISPF? But what I want to do is I want to go down to MVS. Here's all the MVS books, and there's PDF forms of them. We've got all kinds of online forms. If I want to find the MVS messages and codes, it'll be in here. There's the system commands that we're going to be looking at here very shortly. That's the current manual number right there. So it may be a more advanced manual than the one I had in my presentation. Here's system codes, but that's different than system messages. Let me see if my cursor, yeah, my cursor is showing up there. System codes. And there is the messages. I can find that here. There they are. Notice how the system messages, does this look familiar? 3 characters, 3 characters. See that? Divvied up into 3 characters. So volume 1 through volume 10. Now I will tell you this, volume 1 of the system messages has an introduction. Some of the things I told you this morning are in that volume 1 introduction. There are some people that never read it. The introductions of some of these ZOS manuals are excellent, with lots of good technical information to give you a good solid foundation. But let's go to the commands book, and I want to do a few things here. So let's look at system commands. I'm going to double click on that. It's going to bring up the PDF. While I'm waiting for it to come up, because I'm bored waiting on it, here's our system right here that you're all looking at. And I can actually see that 16 has been trying a couple things. And I can see that 5 logged on just now. See, there's all kinds of unsolicited messages in here too. I can see that IBM 005 logged on. Well, what if I want to see who's logged on right now? / I'm in SDSF, I'm in the system log, and if I type in a / that says SDSF, please pass this command to the operating system. So D space TS comma L is display time sharing with the list. So these are all the people logged on to TSO. Okay? So let's go back to our operator book. Here's the MVS system commands. And if I went to chapter 4, here's a list of all the commands. Now, if I look at display, you're going to see display goes on a long, long way. All kinds of things you can display. So one of the lab things is to go to the book and do different displays. So here's what I would like for someone to do, anyone that's listening. Here's the operating system. Someone go out there and try to do a D space parmlib, P-A-R-M-L-I-B. And anyone that wants to, try some commands. And you can actually see them come out on the system log. So I see that IBM 002 did a command. 4 just did a command. I can see that 4 did the D space parmlib. 3 just did a command. So I see 15 just did a command. So as you get the idea, I can see the output of your command. Also, you're getting the output of the command at your screen. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have, Ron, which ID are you? 16. So Ron in the room is 16. I'm going to have Vance cancel Ron, and we're going to see who did it. Yeah. So Vance in the room is going to cancel Ron. Oh, and so what he did is actually IBM 17 tried it first. Oh, but who's 15? Oh, Ramon. Okay, so we can see here in the log that Vance said, oh, just see the ID. But then Ramon, who's remote, said, oh, no, Vance, you got to put the U in front of it because that's the user ID. And then at this point, IBM 16 was canceled right here. And we know who did it. Ramon did it, 15. Now, if someone wanted to, they could cancel Ramon, but Ramon will get back at you, so you may want to. Ramon's got a lot of tricks. So we can see in here that Ron was canceled by Ramon, who's 15. Okay. So I've shown you where the bookshelf is and where the commands are. There's many things you can do, but what I would like to do, since we have a little bit of time here, we're doing very well time-wise, I want to show you FTP. And I want to show you a couple things you can do with FTP and how we could potentially issue commands with FTP. So you can actually see my workstation desktop. And I'm actually on a Linux machine running a virtual Windows. So I'm bringing up a command prompt. And if I say FTP to the system, and then I'm going to log in with IBM 049, give it the password. Whoops, wrong password. Okay, I'm logged on. Now, just to let you know, see how it says the working directory is this ID? If I do a dir, These names that you're looking at right here are the data set names with this prefix. So the full name is that dot data. These are the same thing you saw when you did a list C. So what I could do, change directory to, let's just say TCP/IP. Now my prefix is TCP/IP. If I do a DIR, look at all, those are all data sets that become a TCP/IP. Now, if I want to look at what's in the Unix, I'm going to CD to slash, which is root. DIR, that is what's in the root. CD to slash U, DIR. We must have a lot of stuff in there. Yeah, so everybody's got their own root directory. But this is something that I think I forgot to customize, so I am going to customize it. If I say quote site file type equal JES, and let's see if it'll let us do it. It said accepted. Now, the other thing I'm going to see if I've got this fully configured, I'm going to do quote site JES job name equal asterisk, JES status equal all, JES owner equal asterisk. And it came back and said, you're not allowed to do that because your JES interface level is only 1. Well, most systems by default are set this way. So what I would like to do, because we got a little bit of time, I'm going to change that right now as an exercise of using ISPF to change a data set, and I'm going to restart FTP. So I'm going to get it. Actually, I don't need to even get out of this, but I will. Quit. Now, I need to log on with a full, actually, this ID may work. Equal 3.4, and I happen to know where the data set is. It needs to be changed. There's a way to find it, but I'm going to edit this data set. Sometimes when you edit, you get this initial entry panel. You can just hit enter, accept defaults. And I'm going to page down. This is what FTP is reading when it's coming up. However, what I want to do is there's a default parameter, but I want to replicate one of these lines. I'm going to replicate this line, R. And I'm going to say JES interface level is 2. So I'm going to save this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to SDSF, equal SD, enter. Now there's a couple different tricks. I'm going to display one. This is like being at the ready prompt, TSO, but I want to issue a command, netstat byte. And what netstat byte does is it gives you all the sockets that are listening. Notice here at the bottom, I have a user ID, a byte out count, a byte in count, the local port, the foreign socket, and the state. It turns out FTP is listening on port 21, and I can see that somebody does have a session with FTP right now. We can figure out who that is, but, oh, I do know who it is. It looks like IBM 002 has a session with FTP. Yeah, there's the port 20. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to terminate FTP, I'm going to do it from, I can do it from here, SDSF primary option menu, or do it from the log. So if I cancel, /cancel FTP serve, that's the name of it. How do we know what the name is? Whoever sets up the system makes the name. So I just canceled FTP, and if I do a netstat byte, we'll actually see that FTP server's not listening anymore. See, there's nobody listening on port, no, it's there right there. There's a 21 still there. Did it come down yet? Ah, there it is. Okay, there's the cancel. FTP serve cancel command accepted. TSO netstat byte. And there's, oh, he's still there. I wonder if this thing's restarting. Not active. Let's just start it again. Start FTP serve. Okay, here he is coming back up. And the reason I did that is because now I'm going to go back to my command prompt because we made a parameter change. I'm going to FTP to the IP address of our system. Now I'm going to log in. Give it the password. Now I'm going to say quote site, file type equal JES, quote site JES job name equal asterisk all job names, JES status equal all, JES owner asterisk. Now that's a filter that I just set. I turned off all filters. Now if I do a DIR, this is what's in what's called the JES queue. That's JES. But watch what I can do here. Let me find out what my present working directory is on my, oops. Actually, I want my Unix directory. Bear with me for a second. I'm going to get out of this. And here's what I'm going to do. Notepad, cancel command, or just cancel.txt. /* $VS cancel user equal, and which, you're 17? IBM 001, or ZIBM 017. Now, that's not the only command I'm going to do. I'm going to do another command. I'm going to do a display command, too. Display M. Actually, we'll do something with M equals store. That'll be better. So let's save that. And then, back at the command prompt, I'm going to FTP in. Give it the password. And quote, site, file type equal JES. Now if I say put cancel.txt, see, that's actually putting things in the reader to be executed, not just physically transferring the data. Because I said file type site, quote site file type equal JES, that's going into the reader to execute. So if I do that, it put it up there, and if we look here in the log, here's the command. So it said internal, but it came from FTP, but it knows who did it. Because, let me go Let me actually put the cursor right here. And right here, this is a JES message. And by the way, JES, the dollar symbol is JES, and JES is one of the few things that is grandfathered. It does not follow the 3-character convention. It's one of the only things that I know of that doesn't. JES commands begin with HASP. It stands for Houston Automated Spooler. And it's a long history behind it, and look it up in Google. But anyway, so it came in through JES, through the internal reader, and said the internal reader passed this from that ID. And that ID canceled that and did a D space M equals store, and that's for our storage. And I can see this has got 2 gig of memory. This operating system is running under a hypervisor VM, and it's got 2 gig of storage. So I just entered the command through FTP. Okay, and what I would like to do is actually open things up for any questions or anything you might like to see before I get into the labs and talk about the labs. So I'm going to unmute the phone here, $70.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
So if anyone's got a question at all, please feel free to ask, and we can try to answer it. And if no one has a question, there is one thing that I would like to try to do. Anyone who's a non-IBMer that would like to be a volunteer, I would like to make you a presenter and have you present your 3270 session, and I can direct you what to do. There's a purpose for me doing this, because we'll find that through the week, a couple people will have a few problems. And what I've always done in classes where people are local, I actually have them come up in front of the room, and we use their laptop to demonstrate the problem that they're having, and we all use that as a learning experience.